Hey guys, thanks for joining in to History on the Cornwalls. We're going to talk about the origin of the Cornwall and move through its lifetime up until today and talk about the current Cornwalls and what changes have been made over the years. Leading back to the heresy, this is kind of the rest of the story. We talked about the Cornwall coming in after the heresy as a center channel because the heresy just didn't have enough output capability to keep up with the K-horns. So Paul grabbed the same drivers, basically, that were in the K-horns and put them in a bass reflex cabinet, trying to keep up with the K-horns to give a center image. It was the idea that K-horns needed to be really tight into the corner of a room, and some rooms were wide enough at seating position that image was just still too wide. So they put a center channel in the middle to help solve the center image issues and give that somewhat third dimension in a very solid form in the 3D stereo format. The original Klipsch Cornwall, when it come out, Valerie was the one, Valerie, wrong wife. Sorry, Belle. Paul's first wife, Belle, actually named the Cornwall because it worked as a corner or a wall speaker. So she heard Paul say that, and she said, "We'll just call it the Cornwall." Okay. As it was put together in the lab, they started off, I believe, in '59, and it looked quite a bit different than what this speaker looks today. They had a picture frame edge around the front of that speaker. HF driver was still the K77. They also used a 1,000 hertz horn, or the K1000, as a mid-range horn, which was similar to the Heresy when it first started. Late '59 up through '61 or so is when they started using the 55V. They changed to the K600 horn in '63. A couple of years later, they went into the M woofer. Shortly after that, in I believe '68 or so, they went to the Paducah, Kentucky built CTS woofer. Mid-'70s, '74, '75, you had the vertical version go out of existence. The vertical version of the Cornwall, where the horns are horizontal on this, the horns on that speaker would be vertical in this orientation. That way you could lay it on its side and have the same configuration as you have here in a sideways version of the speaker. It showed it close to the ground, sitting on the floor. You know, there was a lot of short furniture in the '70s. So it worked okay, but it didn't last very long because there wasn't that much of a need for it at the time. We kind of wish it was back now because it would have a good center channel for a Cornwall, would be a horizontal Cornwall. The original speakers had the backs and the fronts inset and screwed in. So there was a fur strip around the inside of the cabinet that was glued and screwed all the way around, and then the front motor board and the back motor board were actually screwed into that. So you had 12 or 16 screws around the front of those boards holding them in place. There was a second version, and they called it Cornwall II when we went to the 600 hertz horn. So they had a Cornwall I with a 1,000 hertz horn, a Cornwall II with a 600 hertz horn, and then we went to a Cornwall II, quotation marks, when they changed the cabinet structure. Sometime in the late '70s, early '80s, they went to the Eminence woofer and the K33E. And that E woofer kind of propagated throughout everything that used that same size woofer. They had some network changes over that time frame where they went from B to a B2 and a B3 network changes. Some of those changed the slope of those networks. Some of them just changes to accommodate different new drivers so that Paul kept the signature that he was looking for in the Cornwall. In the mid-'80s, he went to what is known as the Cornwall II. It's the second version of the Cornwall II, but it's the Cornwall II. And that's when they changed the cabinetry and inset the motor boards. They grooved the side panels and started wrapping the cabinets so that the motor board and the back boards were both wrapped by the outer board. So that kind of cabinet's been done for quite some time, but it makes the cabinet extremely strong. And because of that, you've got that C channel and that board stuck in it. So you've got glue on three sides so that it's not moving. The board will break before the glue joint breaks most of the time. In doing so, they also changed the way the horns sit into the cabinet. And those horns were moved from behind that board to the front of that board to help with some of the diffraction problems that you get firing through that board at higher frequencies. So by moving it up front, you were able to smooth out some of that stuff, and it looked good. Probably helps with the wife acceptance factor. The size of this speaker usually is its problem and its glory. Because, you know, just like on a baby grand piano, it's hard to take a baby grand piano and make it much smaller and have it do what it's supposed to do. Well, the same thing with this. If you shrink this motor board, it doesn't reproduce sound the same way as if you have that full wide board for this. That 15-inch woofer, it's not done very often in the audio industry anymore because of the physical size of the cabinet. They'd rather give you multiple drivers and get the air volume moved as to have one driver to do it because of the physical size. This goes back to, this is the better way to do it. It's just a better way to do it. We don't care, you know. Paul was a utilitarian when it comes to that kind of stuff, you know. He wanted to make sure that it did its job first and foremost. And if you could make it pretty after that fact, then we could make it pretty. But let's make it work properly first. And then I believe in 1990 is when they discontinued the Cornwall II. And it took a hiatus until 2006 when they brought it back as a Cornwall III. For a number of years, there's been a group that would come visit the plant and the offices, and we called them the Pilgrims or Pilgrimage. It's open to the public through our online forum. And in 2006, they came to visit us and we showed them the Cornwall III. And we set them up and we showed them off, and we told everybody that they couldn't say anything. Not to tell the internet that the Cornwall was coming back. We wanted it to be a surprise when we took it to CES, not to say anything. Well, we've carried prototypes for them to hear. We let them see them and listen to them, and had a good time at the pilgrimage that year. And they left, and we all went back to our offices going, all right, word's out. We're gonna know, everybody's gonna know the Cornwall's coming. We should see some excitement about this. And there was nothing. Nobody said a word. We had 100 people show up and see this, and not a soul said a word. Finally, we had to get online and reach out to them and goes, okay, you can talk about it now. and then the group from our forum members started chatting about it, and it escaped to the world, and we went on to deliver the Cornwall as we hoped, and it come out with a pretty good bang, and we've been selling them really well ever since. When they come back with the Cornwall 2006, it had the case 701 horn in it. That 701 horn with the K52 Ti driver made up that horn assembly and was used in a multiple of speakers in Klipsch line. The same could be said for the HF driver. One of the things that changed when they went to that new horn is they were able to move that woofer up closer to the horn, so the radius cut into the horn matched the woofer a little closer. And by doing so, they got the center of, acoustic center of that speaker changed a little bit and moved a little closer together. In this latest version of speakers, they changed that mid-range horn completely. And in my mind, that's a good thing, because the new horn, in my mind, is a much better horn than the exponential horn that was in there earlier. On the new Cornwall, you know, we're talking about the mid-range, you notice the mid-range horn's much bigger than the earlier versions. This horn size gives you a much better mid-range coverage pattern. You'll notice that it also has the mumps. As your air column hits this corner, it loses contact with the horn and you lose control. By adding these wedges or these mumps back into this horn, it allows this horn to hold control over that air column for a longer period of time. that allows a smoother transition from the HF to the mid-range, and it helps mask that crossover point a little bit in the coverage pattern, especially if you're off axis from the speaker. If you have two people, for example, sitting in the room and they're sitting side by side and you want to get a stereo image from both of them, you get a better stereo image at each seat simply because you're in the coverage pattern and not in the null of that horn. One of the things that Roy has really pushed forward since Paul's passing was to carry that torch and try to remember where we come from and remember the way Paul voiced product and try to have these products voiced in the same manner as Paul would voice the product. I feel like Roy does a really good job holding the DNA in a place that Paul would be proud of. You know, he learned a tremendous amount from Paul, and having Roy do the voicing helps keep Paul alive in the DNA of this product. This speaker is capable of doing more than it's ever been able to do in coverage pattern, in bandwidth, in distortion levels. It's just a next step up. I mean, every engineer in the world that's working on speakers is searching for that last 10%. Getting that first 90%'s been done. That last 10% is the part that's hard to get, you know, and I think reaching for things like the lower distortions and better coverage patterns and new patented technologies to come into these speakers does help move them into the 21st century. So we'll see these speakers again soon as we're going to do some comparison, listen between these and the Fortes, and later on these and the Scalas. So you'll be seeing these products back again soon. Thanks for tuning in. You guys be sure and like and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'm Trey.